One.
Monday night edition of the Anaheim Calling podcast. It's the Ducks bye week. We're entering the All-Star break. And so this isn't a post-game episode as we usually do. We haven't done one of these in a while where we're just going to talk about the Ducks, talk about maybe the league as a whole. A little bit more of a relaxed tone on this one.
It's going to be kind of close to a Patreon episode. For anyone that
Yeah.
is a patron, you'll kind of realize where all this is going, how this is going to pan out. But for those of you that aren't, this will give you a little bit of a sample of what all of our Patreon episodes have to offer.
Sample size.
Yes. Let's make it a good sample size right now.
Yeah, so with the Ducks entering their bye, we're not going to be seeing any Ducks hockey for 7 days. So it was 9 days starting from when they last played. So it's going to be a little bit of a while here, and there's not really a whole lot to talk about in terms of recent news. The Ducks sent down a bunch of players over the weekend: Daniel Sprong, Max Jones, Chase DeLeo. Brought up Blake Pytela, which I'm not really sure why, but I think you had a possible explanation.
I have a possible explanation. What the best thing I can come up with is you have to have a 20-man roster in the NHL. It's a requirement. And so if they would have sent down everyone and not called up anyone, the Ducks would have been sitting, I believe, at a 19-man roster with 10 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies. So they had to call up someone in order to send down all the kids that they wanted to send down in order to hit that 20-man roster size. And, I mean, Blake Pytela is a winger. It seems like as I was looking through the goals lineup and the goals rosters from the last couple games, he had only played on the third or fourth line. So he's kind of a replaceable part from what it seems, and maybe wouldn't have been the guy that would have come out for a guy like a Daniel Sprong going down, a guy like Troy. I mean, because they've just added Daniel Sprong, Troy Terry, Max Comtois, and Max Jones. So there are 4 wingers coming into their lineup, and someone's going to be the odd man out because of that. And
calling Blake Pytela replaceable.
Sure.
Savage.
I mean, am I wrong? Am I wrong?
No comment.
Okay.
No comment.
Fair. Oh wait, Chase DeLeo also got sent down. So there's another person that could play the wing.
Yeah, I said that.
Oh, yeah. I didn't mention his name though.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. So the Gulls play a bunch of times they play this weekend, they play over the week, they play next weekend. So I don't really view this as Jones or Sprong getting demoted as much as just, hey, the team is going to be off, but they can get some more reps. And, they're not getting a huge ice time in Anaheim. So they're going to have an opportunity to get down there and just be a part of the Gulls. And Troy Terry has been producing down in the AHL. He's playing again. And so we will see now what the Ducks are going to do coming out of their bye week and the All-Star break. I would expect Troy Terry to come back up after that, and then we'll have to see what happens with Daniel Sprong, because it's kind of the spot, right? That right wing spot where Troy Terry will presumably be on the top line next to Getzlaf and Raquel. I mean, not that he's really done anything to deserve it, but that's presumably where he will be.
Wow.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just over a point per game in his 5-game stint in the AHL. So no big deal.
In another league.
Hey,
in a lower professional league.
I think that's better than what Daniel Sprong had done in for the Gulls.
Snake bitten, and also Daniel Sprong's been better at the NHL level. So
fair.
Anyway.
Real quick. Wait.
The point being though, part of me doesn't think that this just means Jones and Sprong are sent down permanently, but it could be. There's really no way of knowing until the break is over. So they could be back.
Quick question for you. Mm-hmm. If you're one of those kids, specifically the ones that have been with the Ducks for a majority of the season, like a Max Jones, would you be annoyed that your bye week was taken away?
Well, I get to go spend it in San Diego.
Yeah, but it's not a bye week then. You still got practice. You still have everything like that. So would you be annoyed? Because, some of these guys probably have trips planned. Guys want to go to Cabo. I think I saw Michael Del Zotto's in Hawaii. Guys have these trips planned. So
here's the thing that I will say to that. Knowing some of the reputations of these guys, maybe it's not a coincidence they were the ones to be sent down. And kind of stay on the
Are
straight
you
and narrow
trying
path.
are you trying to say that 20-20-year-old kids that suddenly have money, keeping them kind of in line is a good idea?
I think 1 week off, like Sam Steele, for example, why didn't he get sent down?
Yeah. Yeah, Fire Carlisle adds a comment. I don't think you can plan a trip unless you are established, and all those guys sent down are established. That's fair. That's
Sam
fair.
Steele is waiver exempt and is 21 years old. He meets all of the criteria.
Maybe it's just because he has played in the most games out of the kids, so they wanted to give him a break as compared to keeping him playing.
I mean, look, there's so many different explanations, right? But I think that it's not impossible to imagine, hey, let's just make sure these guys are kind of staying focused here.
Yeah. By the way,
which isn't not the worst thing in the world.
By the way, Troy Terry leads the San Diego goals in points per game. 9 points in 5 games.
Small sample. Incredibly small.
Maybe just a little bit. But, build them up.
That's really the only bit of news. I mean, outside of that, there's not a whole lot to comment on. Not really. So Eric Stevens had an article today in The Athletic or yesterday talking about, where the team is at, how important those 2 games were to the confidence of this team. And it got me kind of thinking, we're past the halfway mark of the season, and there's talk about this team looking to generate momentum and trying to find its footing. I feel like we're at the point where we can kind of say we have a pretty good idea of what this team is and isn't. And so one thing that I kind of wanted to go over with you here, and it doesn't have to be in specific order, we can do like 2 or 3, but who are these Anaheim Ducks right now? What is this team? We've got a pretty decent sample. We're 48 games in. So what's one thing off your top of your head that we just know about this team? Just set in stone. This is something we know.
Ooh, this is a team that struggles to score goals. If Jakob Silverberger or Rickard Rakell aren't the ones scoring, the depth isn't there necessarily to score. I think another thing that we know about this team is the power play is not great. I think that you look at kind of the expected goals that they have, it's not great in terms of what they generate on the power play, and that's a fairly big concern for this Ducks team. I think one of the other things is consistency is an issue. They'll have a good period here or there, and then also have awful periods here or there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 3 different things thrown at you.
You just came up with 3 right away.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a couple different places that we can go with that. I would say that getting back to a team that struggles to score, that struggles to produce offense, I think that's been the most glaring thing this season. Maybe not the most glaring. There's a few to choose from, but the lack of offense outside of the guys you named. They rank 19th in expected goals for per 60 at 5-on-5, and we obviously know just how terrible the power play has been, which to me begs the question, and this is the thing that I think we don't know after 48 games. We still don't really know what kind of coach Dallas Eakins is, because there was a lot of talk about how he was going to bring this fresh system. They were going to be an up-tempo team. It was going to be totally different. And, they're definitely, I think, better, just by definition, better than they were last year.
Yeah.
But I don't think we've really seen we haven't really seen the things that were advertised in terms of the speed game, the transition game.
No, I think they played that in the first
5 games.
Yeah, month of the season. The game that sticks out to me, which granted in hindsight is kind of funny because of how the season's gone for the other team, but the game against the Sharks. That was a game where they were continually jumping up into the play, and now maybe in hindsight with hindsight being 2020, you can look at that and be like, well, maybe the Sharks weren't as good as everyone thought they were going to be, which seems about right. But still, they showed signs in that game of the ability to jump in the rush. I mean, that was a game where I thought Brendan Gooley looked insanely good in his ability to jump in the rush, and he hasn't been heard from since then, basically. And so
he's on a milk carton.
There were a lot of great signs from this team early on, outside of just wins and losses, just from the process standpoint, and those have kind of gone away to a certain extent, which isn't that kind of out of the ordinary, I guess, when you look at the age of the forwards on this roster. But I think the big concern is the production of the kids. And this kind of comes back with trying to evaluate Dallas Eakins, at least on this, is the numbers are better this year than they were last year under Carlisle. Marginally better, but better.
Well, so kind of put a pin in the kids for now. So back to kind of this overall team. What's interesting to me is that they have gotten better from a defensive standpoint. It's I don't want to say night and day from last year, because there have been some games where you're cringing a little bit watching this team.
Yeah.
But I think overall they've reached a level of defensive respectability that they didn't have at all last year. Right. Just watching this team, that's how it feels. But then you look at the numbers and expected goals against per 60, they ranked 27th. So despite these supposed improvements, statistically, there's not a lot of evidence that they're that much better defensively. Now, here is where I transition a bit away from Dallas Eakins and more into the team building. This team hasn't been good defensively overall. Again, I think they've been better. The bar is incredibly low, but they've been better. I just think this team was never really built to be this kind of defensive anything. I mean, you look at the roster they had opening night. You had Brendan Gooley, who's been an AHL guy during his career with really no full-time NHL experience, as a left-handed shot, playing next to Cam Fowler, playing on his off wing. And then you had Jacob Larson and Corbin and Holzer as your third pairing. Like, this was just never... I feel like this blue line was never designed to be like a functional unit. It took a trade for Eric Goodbranson and for Manson and Lindholm to get healthy at the same time to finally see some kind of cohesion. It took a while, and it took a trade. So that's why it's hard for me to totally dock Dallas Eakins with these defensive numbers, because I think the roster was not constructed to really perform in that way. And I mean, you look at their fourth line, it's interesting because in the beginning of the season, we talked about how, look at Dallas Eakins rolling 4 lines and utilizing all 4 of his lines. Well, regardless of the usage, that fourth line is basically a Carlisle-esque fourth line. I mean, Delorier, Grant, Rowney has been such a steady presence in the Ducks lineup, and they've been terrible.
Yeah.
Grant has provided things here and there in terms of shorthanded play, but at 5-on-5, that fourth line has been skated off the ice most nights. Yeah. They've had some nights, but this all just leads me to wonder, what was Dallas Eakins really working with going into this year?
Well, the only thing I will say about that fourth line, and not that I think it's great, I do think that it is slightly different than what Randy Carlisle would have played, because I think that they're playing slightly different, and maybe that is coaching there, having them play different. But
yeah, I mean, they're definitely worse than last year's fourth line.
Wow,
if that's
shots
what you mean.
Fired. No, but it reminds me of a Bruce Boudreau fourth line at times, though. Bruce had a tendency at different points in time to play a fourth line like this. I think it is played slightly different than Randy Carlisle did, but that doesn't excuse it. I still think it's a bad decision. I think that there are issues with that line. Delorier, for as much as people love him people are always going to love the tough guy on the team. He's not great. Derek Grant, for all the goals that he scored, does not have great 5-on-5 numbers. He's continually
all the face-offs that he wins.
Yeah, and so that is a flaw in this team. But yeah, I think with Dallas Eakins, though, there needs to be more time given, essentially.
Well, I just want to see him eventually with a roster that makes sense.
Yes, and that's key.
And again, I think that what we don't know is what type of coach Dallas Eakins really is, but we can still glean some things. Like, for example, the power play. The Ducks have enough talent to have a respectable league average power play, and they haven't done that. They haven't done that at all, and I think that is a mark against Dallas Eakins, because that's something that you can really control, or at least you have way more control over than 5-on-5, which is fluid, and there's a lot of matchups there. So that is one disappointing thing, but in the bigger scheme of things, how much do you really weigh that against him? And then the other thing that we know about this team, moving a little bit away here from Dallas Eakins, John Gibson has not been at all what we saw last year. And look, this Ducks team, we talked about some of the numbers and their defensive capabilities. With maybe average goaltending, they're still not pushing a playoff spot, I don't think. but at the very least, they would be a lot more competitive than they are right
Yeah.
now. And they're just not getting any goaltending.
I think Gibson has had pretty poor stretches so far this season. He's had some really bad games. I think he's starting to turn the corner a bit, but
he's been uncharacteristically bad.
And here's the thing on that. That's what happens though with fatigue. That's what happens when with seasons like last year. You don't necessarily see the effect of that during that season. Mm-hmm. You see the effect the season after because he's not able to fully recover, and then it affects his game the next season. It's not uncommon, honestly, for goaltenders to have really, really great seasons one year and then completely fall off the next, because most of the times guys that had that great season were worked into the ground. And that kind of really has an effect the next season. We saw it with Cam Talbot. That's kind of my go-to example for this type of situation. He was so good in Edmonton, and over the course of the entire season, and he played, I think, 74 games or something like that in the regular season. Mm-hmm. And in adding in the playoffs, playing 2 rounds, I think he got up into the 80 game range. And playing that amount of games is not sustainable for a guy, and it's gonna have an impact the next season. And that's when you saw it with Cam Talbot. You didn't necessarily see it in the playoffs. You saw it the season after because of his body kind of breaking down from seeing that many shots, from just being overworked. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing from John Gibson this year, of essentially him being overworked from last year.
Well, what's funny is that I don't think it's changed a ton this year either.
No.
Last year is definitely a contributing factor. Even the last 2 years, you could argue. But this year, I mean, he's played in 36 games out of their 48. It's not like he's not playing at all either. Or it's not like he's getting this, tremendous amount of rest. And also, like we just discussed, the Ducks aren't much better defensively this year either. Yeah. So he's still getting a huge workload. What's interesting is that if you look at the goalies this year who have struggled, when you look at, the save percentage above expected on Money Puck, it's all the guys who get that big workload. So you have Sergei Bobrovsky down there, Frederik Andersen, John Gibson, Carey Price, Marc-Andre Fleury. It's all these guys who have always been carrying that torch for their teams, and a lot of them are having down seasons. So it's interesting. It's probably just a coincidence, but nevertheless, the evidence has been there for a while now that you probably shouldn't be starting your goalies a bunch of games if you don't have to. Now, some may say, well, look at John Gibson's games last year was just 58, but I mean,
it's the amount of shots. It's the amount of shots that he faced.
But he missed some time too. If he had been healthy the whole season, he probably would have topped 60 again, and he had 60 the year before.
Yeah.
So anyway, that explains part of it. He also you look at his raw save percentage. He had a 917 last year. He has a 906 this year. He just hasn't been good. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because that was when we talked about projecting the Ducks going into the season, we kind of treated that John Gibson play as a known commodity, that, hey, as long as John Gibson shows up and performs and this team has a marginal improvement, they could be in the playoffs picture. And the team hasn't been that much better, and John Gibson has been well below expectations.
So the Mo Morgas, if Gibson played like last year, how many more wins do you think the Ducks would have this year?
Well, that is an interesting question, which I'm sure there's a way to figure out mathematically the amount of wins that he would add.
Yeah.
I mean, well, let's just look at the standings. There's at least a way to kind of parse this out. If John Gibson is to the level he was last year, what is that? Maybe 3 wins better?
Probably, at least. How many goals saved was he last year above expected?
Oh, I would need to take a look at that. But right now,
he was probably around 10 to 15 at this point in time last season.
Well, right now the Ducks have 43 points. So assuming John Gibson steals them 3 more games, or just doesn't lose them 3 games, whatever, they would be at 51 points. So they'd still be well outside the playoff picture. Yeah. 52 points. They'd still be well outside the playoff picture. So, yeah, the team just hasn't been good enough, and he hasn't been there to kind of compensate for that. He would need to be freakishly good this year to have them in the playoffs, even in a pretty weak Pacific Division that nobody seems to want to win.
Yeah, and I think that's where kind of, if you look at not our projections, because I think going into the season we both said the ceiling for this team was making the playoffs. The floor for this team was being a bottom feeder. And kind of the by the way, good guy in sports chimes in saying he was about 12 GSAA last year, GSAX last season. So,
Mm.
or Alex, can you double check if that is that GSAA or what website that's from? Some of them GSAA is different. GSAX is what is good to take a look at because that's expected. But I kind of lost my train of thought actually after that. With predictions and kind of looking at the high end of that, it was banking on the fact that John Gibson, like you said, would be playing the way that he played last year, or not even necessarily that high, but just maintaining a high level of performance. And then on top of that, the kids would come in and provide secondary scoring for the team. And I think a good season for the higher end of the kids, like I think we said Sam Steele and Troy Terry, would have been 40 to 50 points, right?
Mm.
I think that's what you and I agreed on, that to hit that playoff mark, those guys would have to be in that 40 to 50 point range.
And that's to me the next landing point for this conversation is a lot. Like you said, so much of this circles back to the younger guys, the kids, and has any of them even come close to making an impact on this team?
No, not from a. I think they've made impacts in different games, in various games, and have made impacts that don't show up necessarily on the scoreboard. But at the end of the day, they are being put into very high roles, and they're being put into roles that on other teams they would not be in that situation. Sam Steele would not be treated like a second or third line center on other teams in this league that are contending. And that's mainly because they're not producing like that. They're put in these roles and they're not able to produce. And that's kind of the issue. And so that's what happens when you're a rebuilding team, is that you have to thrust guys into roles that they're not ready for. And it's kind of sink or swim. And I mean, this might sound harsh, but they've kind of, at least for this season, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is how they're going to be in the next 2 or 3 years, or even for the rest of the year. But so far this season, I think for the most part, all of them have sunk from the general perspective of looking at their impact on the games throughout the year.
Yeah, I'm very curious. So Scott Wheeler is doing a prospect ranking over at The Athletic right now, and they're releasing it kind of day by day. And I'm very curious what his breakdown of the Ducks prospects will be.
Do you think they'll be top 10?
Yeah, probably still top 10, but I'm just curious to see like the individual evaluations of each guy, because I think having Trevor Zegras puts you in the top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, Corey Proman had him as his highest rated
overall
prospect. Yeah, exactly. So there's still a lot to be excited about within the system, but I think this year has tempered a lot of expectations. And one guy that I don't want to say it's all his fault, because it's never one guy's fault, but with Sam Steele on the ice this year, when you go to, so there's a great website for those who don't know, Hockey Viz, ran by Micah McCurdy, and he's at Ineffective Math on Twitter, and he's got these really good charts.
I'll get it up on the screen right now, so keep going.
Pretty easy to understand, but basically you can look at a chart of where the shots are coming from when a certain player is on the ice, and the shots are designed so that they isolate that specific player's impact. And so defensively, he has this way of looking at it called threat. So you can be plus or minus a certain percentage above league average. So if you're in the plus defensively, it means you're giving up more than league average. And so a minus would be good there because you're giving up less, and then vice versa offensively.
And now up on the screen is that that chart with in the defensive zone for Sam Steele that
and
Felix
so with
is referencing.
Sam Steele, he's at plus 6% this season. So the Ducks are bad defensively with him on the ice this year, and it's not just looking at that chart. I mean, if you just look at the raw numbers, they're bad as well. And then if you look at him offensively, the Ducks are minus 5% in terms of threatening the other team's net. And so he's just been a negative impact player this year, and he's had some individual moments, but to me, he just looks so far removed from being ready as a full-time NHL center. And it's unfortunate because I think he has the makeup of a guy who can be that. He seems real quiet, real humble. I think he's got the kind of tools where he could become that, but he just looks a step behind. The speed isn't there. The strength isn't there. There are games where you see flashes, but those games are really few and far between.
Yeah.
And so to me, if we're looking at all of the prospects, I think that he's in a position where just as a center, you're more involved with the play, and so there's more opportunities to be evaluated. And I think he's probably been the one that's just been the furthest behind the eight ball.
Yep. And we'll get more into that and some of your questions after our first break. And we are back. And so on Sam Steele, the one thing that I want to add to that conversation is this is one thing I try to kind of say with any sort of prospect, any sort of kid, especially one that's younger than 23 or 24 years old, because 24 is usually when they start getting close to their prime production years, and then that's just going to continue through 28 or 29.
24 through 29 is kind of that peak. Yeah.
So as we're coming into that, and not all guys develop the same. Some guys will peak later, some guys peak a little bit earlier. But with Sam Steele, I think what's important to kind of think about, and this is my thought process on this, is that not every kid's going to come in and be a world beater, but at least show me flashes of what you can become and what you will eventually be. It may not be there every single night, but every couple nights, at least show me. And I think that's what's important for the rest of this year is at least let's see some flashes of what these kids can be. And hopefully, maybe down the stretch, it can become more of a consistent thing. But I think we have seen stretches for each of them of what they can do. I think maybe the one that's been the two least impressive or the least or the most disappointing, however you want to put it, for me are the two youngest ones, and maybe that's just simply the answer to it, but are Comtois and Lundestrom.
Yeah, so I don't think that Lundestrom should really factor into any of this because I just think in an ideal world and just maybe with the plans of the organization, I don't think he was meant to play in the NHL this season.
Probably not.
I mean, he turned 20 this past November, and he barely has any North American pro experience. I think this season was supposed to be about him being in the AHL all year long, and because of injuries and Dallas Eakins' insistence on using Adam Henrique at the wing, hey, he got a full-on cameo, and it is disappointing given that he was a first-round pick, and you just would expect a guy like that to maybe show a little more. I think that the thing with Isaac Lundestrom is that I can still see the tools and how he becomes a really useful player because he's got a good skating stride. I think he's got a good just kind of sense of the play. You see him making good passes. He's got a couple nice assists this year. Good hands, hasn't scored, doesn't shoot a lot, but you can at least see the player there. Now the on-ice impact has been abysmal, but again, he's 20, just turned 20.
Yeah.
So I'm just not really willing to go there. You could almost make the same argument for Maxime Comtois. I mean, it's a pretty similar scenario where he turned 21 just 12 days ago. And so he's still real young, but he's a little closer to that. And his impact has just been abysmal. I mean, defensively, the Ducks have been destroyed. We talked about those charts with Comtois on the ice. The threat level in the Duck zone is plus 16% and offensively minus 14. So he's just a complete net negative. And I think the eye test really checks out with that. When he's on the ice, he just doesn't seem that involved. I hate to use this term because I think it gets thrown around, but he's kind of your textbook floater. He's just that works in junior where you can just kind of sit out there, wait for the puck to pop back out, and then you go off on the rush. But in the NHL, it's more of constantly having to engage in battles, and he's learning that. He's still young, but I think there was a lot of hype around Max Comtois, and some of it warranted. He's an exciting player. You see, we talked about tools. He's got the size. I think he's got a decent shot. But there's a whole area of his game that just needs to be rounded out before he can be taken seriously as a prospect again. And maybe part of that is on the organization where maybe ideally, in fact, the way to go with him was to put him on a fourth line instead of putting him next to Ryan Getzlaf in those kind of high leverage situations. Maybe using that fourth line just for your average grinder is probably not the way to go. Who knows? You can land on that argument a number of different ways, but he's definitely a guy who's probably been a bit of a disappointment. Where do you land on Max Jones?
I think Max Jones has actually had a pretty good year. I think he's been a bit snake bitten, but if you look at a lot of the different metrics, he's actually had a solid year in terms of generating his shots and generating chances for the Ducks this season. And so I was someone who was not that high on Max Jones prior to this season. And I have to say, he's really impressed me this year. And now, granted, the counting stats aren't there, and so I think that is a disappointment without a doubt. But I think that it's impressive what he's done in terms of generating shots and getting shots for himself.
Yeah, no, to me, he's another one of those guys who you can definitely see where the skill set can eventually lead to. I don't know if he ever becomes a goal scorer. He doesn't, for a guy who gets a lot of pucks on net, you never really look at his shot and think, oh man, that kid's got a shot. Like I get that thought when I watch Troy Terry shoot or Daniel Sprong shoot, but Max Jones is more of a volume guy. He's more like an Andre Kasha, and I think it's a good comparison. And he's a pretty good skater. He's not that fast, but he's strong on his edges. I think he's pretty smart with the puck. Obviously, you want to see him lower that penalty tendency a little bit, but he's been fine. And it's interesting how expectations, what that will do to your perception of a player, because Comtois, Steele, Terry came in with all of the hype, and I think that affects how we view them now, whereas Jones, I think he was lumped into that group, but you didn't necessarily think, okay, I'm expecting a whole lot out of this guy.
Which is funny because he was the highest draft pick out of all of those three.
Yeah, just totally gone forgotten.
Speaking of which, real quick, I want to hit this and one other thing, and then we can move on to. We got a couple questions that I want to get to. But by the way, looking at these isolated impact charts, Troy Terry, Ducks are better with him than without him. Threat +7 in the offensive zone, and threat -8 in the defensive zone with Troy Terry. And the other thing that I do want to mention on a very, very positive note when looking at these charts, Cam Fowler is having a monster year.
Yeah, he's been legitimately just excellent as a number one defenseman.
Yeah, he's so I now have on the screen the threat for him, and these are relative to league average. So he's -6 compared to league average, +8 when compared to league average in the offensive zone.
Yeah, he's been outstanding. And then, yeah, like the thing with Troy Terry is that I think he's been fine in terms of just treading water, which is important because you see Sam Steele not doing that at all. Whereas Troy Terry, he's not a guy who's going out there and killing the team at 5-on-5.
Well,
I think on an individual level is probably where you want to see him shine more. But hey, if he can do this now, then that gives him more time to just grow into his skill set.
I'm wondering, just kind of looking at these charts and looking at some of the numbers for Troy Terry, maybe this is me being a bit biased, and I'll fully admit
it's also harder to compare them.
It is. No, I'm just more kind of now talking about Terry as a whole. Are we too harsh on him with the way we judge his game? When you look at these charts, it's almost surprising in a way with the way that we've talked about him that he is this good from an offensive and defensive perspective. I mean, we just said that Cam Fowler's had a monster year, right? He's at -8% and +8%.
Yeah, but the thing is, you can't compare those two guys. They're not at all playing the same
they
role.
play different positions completely. But
even if you can say their impacts are isolated on those charts, you're still it's not an apples to apples.
No,
comparison.
I'm not saying that necessarily, but I'm saying, are we underrating the impact that Terry has had on the Ducks when he's on the ice?
We're probably underrating how much of an impact he's had, but by the same token, we probably overrate what that impact has been.
Potentially.
I don't think he's having this tremendous impact out there, but yeah, he's probably been a little better than one might think just with his completely lacking individual production. I think that's you can make that statement and be fine. You're not totally just out to lunch there. But yeah, I mean, you can't compare him to Cam Fowler. Come on now.
No, I wasn't. I was just kind of using that.
You even said, when I said that, you said, well, you can't compare them necessarily. Like, no, you just can't.
Fair.
You
fine,
cannot.
Fine.
Retract.
I wasn't necessarily saying that, but fair.
There you go with the necessarily again. Okay. One guy, though, who's really good on these charts. Have you taken a look at Daniel Sprong in his 98 minutes?
What? No, I have not. What is it? I'm getting something else queued up.
Plus 46% offensively.
Wow.
I mean, don't you just love your small samples? But yeah, so just to kind of put a bow on this little evaluation of the prospects is that they've been largely a disappointment, but that's not necessarily cause to totally write them off either. The one guy I'm just slightly concerned about is Sam Steele, and then the rest, I think there's still some time. Fair?
Yeah. Yep. So,
okay.
The next question All right, let's hit this question. By the way, we got our good friend Georgie Khan subscribed to us with Twitch Prime for 11 months. Dan Grimshaw just subscribed for 3 months, is on a 3-month streak. So thank you so much for that. Lewis asked us, assuming the Ducks don't get the opportunity to draft Lafreniere or Byfield, who would you like the Ducks to target if they get a pick in the 3 to 10 range? So have you been doing any research on the upcoming draft class?
I'm going to be fully honest and say that I haven't.
Okay.
Because we're in such a bubble here, following this team and paying attention to their every movement, that I have not really spent the time looking outward. So, have you, is the question.
Yes, I have. I'm happy.
Here we go.
I'm happy you brought that up. So there's a couple different players out there that I think would be interesting in the 3 to 10 range. A lot of people are kind of high on Jamie Drysdale because he's a guy that really became kind of this really good defenseman for Team Canada at the World Juniors and really made his mark on that tournament with Canada. And he's obviously he's the highest rated defenseman in the draft, and kind of where he goes is going to be interesting. But he's a 5'11", 173 defenseman. I'm kind of interested to see where he goes because that's not really the typical mold that you see from a defenseman taken high. I mean, do you know off the top of your head how big Bowen Byram was?
He is taller. I think he's taller. Now I need to take a look. But it's interesting because if you look at the he's 6'1". If you look at the top 10 of this draft, there's a lot of kind of smaller sized forwards that dot the list.
Well, and so kind of in the next wave, I believe Corey Promen, I was trying to find his article, but I can't. I'll try to find it real quick as we're going on this. But I believe in his second kind of group of players, he had both Alexander Holtz and Lucas Raymond, who are both wingers, and in the group. And it's actually interesting. I'm looking at this mock draft website, and they have him actually in the 7 and 8 spot. And then Cole Perfetti is also kind of around. A name that's actually interesting to me from a perspective of there's potential, or we've seen guys come from this league the last couple of years and actually have overperformed what people thought. And maybe it's because it's a little bit of an underscouted league, but Tim Stützle from Mannheim in the German league. And he's on this website at least projected to go 3rd overall. Obviously, it all depends on kind of where you're looking, but he's a left winger. And I remember I didn't watch every single World Junior game, but I do remember watching the USA-Germany game. And Stützle really stood out as being able to generate offense and really as a creative type player. And maybe I'm kind of off base. I'm trying to find his draft profile real quick, but to me, that might be an interesting pick. That's a risky pick, I think, going for someone from the German league.
Yeah, well, the problem is we still just don't know where the Ducks are going to draft. There's such a wide range. And this does have the feel, again, of a draft that kind of like last year, where it feels like after 1 and 2, it's pretty wide open.
All right, so here we go. Granted, this was written by Corey Promen back in October, so a lot can change from then to now. But Alexander Holtz and Lucas Raymond were 3 and 4. Alexander Holtz is a very high skill level and projects to be an elite goal scorer. He's got a big shot, but he can dangle. He's a great passer and he skates well. Whereas Lucas Raymond, let me see real quick. There are doubts about his skill and hockey sense, but he's got an elite brain and can make plays like few others. He's an undersized player who isn't a top-end skater, which has led to some adjustments. So I think if you'd had to pick one of those, you'd probably go for Alexander Holtz if they're both wingers, because you'd rather have the goal scorer than the playmaker because you already have Trevor Zegras within your system.
Yeah, the Ducks have all those playmakers, all those scorers.
Sure. All right, and here's the one on Tim Stützle that I thought was interesting. He's a player who checks off a lot of boxes. He's got a great skating stride, a high skill level. He can make plays, and he can score goals. He's shown as a 17-year-old he can play a large role versus men in a good league, which doesn't happen often.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll have time to get into that, but clearly this does have the feel again of a draft that it seems like you can't really go wrong in that 3 to 12 range. 3 to 11 range, it feels like. So we'll just have to see. We're going to get into our second break here. And then on the other side, we're maybe going to get into some league-wide topics. So we'll be right back. Okay, back from the second break. So, Jake, any closing thoughts on the Ducks here? Any other questions that we can get into?
Sure, let's just blitz through these questions. Which terrible contract will the Ducks take on? That's from Georgie Kahn.
I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that because we kind of did this exercise on our last Patreon episode, but it's not necessarily the easiest deal to pull off. And so I'm not saying it's not going to happen just because it's difficult, but I'm just curious where they're going to land because there are a lot of teams with bad contracts, and I'm just not really sure. What do you think?
The one that I could see them doing, because this is a team that's in go for it mode right now, is David Backes.
Yeah,
there's only 1 year left on that deal after this year.
Yeah.
It gets him a warm body to take up a roster spot. And you could potentially offer them someone to fill that same cap hit, because we talked about this on the Patreon episode. So if you want more in depth on this, go check out that episode. But getting cap space is great, but it doesn't really do anything if you don't fill it with someone, especially if you're going into the playoffs and you're a contending team. So if you're the Boston Bruins and can get rid of David Backes, that's great for you, especially for next year. But that doesn't exactly help you in your push for the playoffs and in your cup run. So if you can offer them up a player like an Adam Henrique or like a Jakob Silfverberg, and essentially you're compounding the return instead of just getting a good player or pick just for taking on the bad money, you're also then adding even more and making the return even greater by including something to fill that role or that cap space for them. So
yeah,
that's the one that really sticks out to me.
I do think that Silfverberg would make a lot of sense for Boston. But the thing is, are the Ducks willing to move that big of a piece just to take on a bad salary?
Yeah. Fire Carlisle adds in, knowing Bob Murray, it's probably going to be Jack Johnson.
There's just so many different ways that could go, and I am very curious to see what'll happen, because we all have our ideas of what the bad contracts are, but you sometimes just never know with how these teams view their own players. So we'll see.
What's one bad contract that you don't want to see on the Ducks? I have one that I know off the top of my head.
I don't really have an opinion on that now.
Give me one. Think of one.
Well, why wouldn't you want? I mean,
from our pure entertainment perspective.
Well, if there's a player that I wouldn't care to see, that I don't care to have to watch every game, it would be Milan Lucic. So
ding ding ding.
Yeah, if they went out and obtained Milan Lucic, which I doubt they will do, because
that term is so bad.
I don't think it makes sense for the Ducks to take on a bad contract that has a bunch of term. You want like a Backes contract makes sense because you're getting that team some relief from a cap hit perspective, but at the same time you're not totally weighing yourself down with the term either. So, and also Boston needs the cap space now because they have to be good now. So, and you can make the same argument for Calgary, except that there's 4 years left after this year for Milan Lucic, which is insane, by the way. Thank you, Peter Chiarelli. 3 years left.
Here's one quick name that I actually hadn't really thought about until right now. What would you do about Louis Eriksson? That's a player that would be interesting for the Ducks. He has not been good for the Canucks over the course of his contract, but like I said, warm body.
2 years left at $6 million.
So 1 extra year. The Canucks are a team that are pushing for a playoff spot for the first time in a while.
You can't trade him within the division.
Yeah. They could use...
By the way, being sarcastic.
Yes.
There.
Maybe you try to get them Josh Manson. You try to get something good back from them on top of taking on Louis Eriksson.
I don't think the Ducks would ever trade Josh Manson within their division.
Probably not. Bob Murray seems too against trading within the division. A guy like that.
Josh Manson would make a lot of sense for the Canucks, though.
Yeah.
Because he's only got, 2 years left after this year?
Yes.
And that is going to be, let's see here. That is going to coincide kind of neatly with some of their UFAs that they have coming up. and then Elias Pettersson is an RFA 2 years from now, and Brock Besser would be an RFA the year after, or right when Josh Manson expires. So maybe, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it would make sense for the Canucks to go out and get any good player. But
that return would have to be very, very good, though, for you to take on Louis Eriksson.
It would, especially if you're also giving up Josh Manson in the process.
Our Twitch chat is getting some good ones in there. Ken Pafu says, Josh Manson for noted bad contract, Elias Pettersson. Fine. Lewis X209 says, Manson for Besser. Let's go. Yeah, those aren't happening. Sorry to burst the bubble.
I think that if you're... The thing with the Canucks is, if I were the Canucks, if I can get Josh Manson back, that's great. But again, this is kind of my whole thing with these bad contracts is I feel like if you're one of these teams, you just kind of want to, my view on it would be, I just want to get rid of the salary just completely out. And unless, like, the reason why I like the Anaheim and Boston trade is because I actually think Silverberg makes sense for the Bruins right now. I still don't love his contract for them long term, but at least he makes sense for their window. And I actually think he's a good fit for their team. But outside of kind of a fit like that existing, I'm not sure I really want anything back or just, anything really substantial on my cap sheet. Yeah. I just want the cap space. I just want to have an opportunity to do it over if I'm the Canucks.
All right. So league-wide topics, now that we've kind of gotten through some bad contract stuff for the Ducks.
Yeah, always a great topic. So we've got a little bit of time left here. So we're headed into the All-Star break, which is kind of crazy because this season is
quick.
It's flown by. It really has.
It seems like it hasn't been as bad as last year, even though in certain ways from the standings it has been.
Well, I think we've been desensitized to.
That's also true.
This team losing a lot of games.
At least there's no Randy Carlyle behind the bench, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least it's interesting in the sense that we can see something new developing as opposed to a retread of what we've seen many times over. So, yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see how the Ducks finish out. I am very curious as to how the Ducks approach the trade deadline, if they do anything at all. You just never know with Bob Murray. But zooming out to the rest of the NHL, what's stuck out to you, whether good or bad? Teams, players, what kind of pops off the page here? I've got a couple. But
honestly, one of the most interesting things to me this year is Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. I did not expect the Penguins to be good. I was actually someone who thought that they would fall off and that they wouldn't make the playoffs.
I think, a lot of people thought that. And I just want to remind you, I think I had them in the playoffs.
You did.
In our predictions, yeah.
But they are one of the best teams in the league. They're rocking a 52.41% expected goals percentage from Money Puck. They are really, and the craziest thing is that they've done all of this without Sidney Crosby and without Evgeny Malkin for various stretches throughout the season.
Well, that's what's impressive is that it's not just like, okay, they've managed to get by without their stars and they've won enough games. It's that they're dominating these games. They're controlling that shot clock. They're controlling play. They're being really stingy defensively. I think Mike Sullivan is my favorite for Jack Adams, Coach of the Year.
The only way he doesn't win is if Columbus makes the playoffs.
Even still,
if Columbus makes the playoffs,
even still, I think I may still have him ahead of John Tortorella, because that Pittsburgh's roster, after those guys, there is just their players have played extremely well. I'm not saying that it's a bad team, but then there's not a lot of names, quote unquote, on that team.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I think they both should be nominated for sure. Well, so what I was going to say, and this is just kind of building on what you're saying, is that the Metropolitan Division has been a surprise to me because Washington is still a machine.
Yeah.
I mean, plus 33 goal differential, leading the Metro, Pittsburgh being second, Islanders, like just that top three basically being what it was last year is very surprising to me because I had predicted Carolina would make that leap. And right now they're in the final wild card spot.
Striking distance.
But it's very tenuous. I mean, if you look at their playoff position, they've got Philly a point behind them, and then they've got Toronto 2 points behind them. So, yeah, they'll probably get in, but it's it's not a sure thing.
Yeah.
And I expected, and I haven't really followed them that closely, but I expected Carolina to be a lot better than at least what they've shown in the standings.
I mean,
and
their underlying numbers are still good. They're basically playing the way that you would expect them to.
they're still a really good team. They just need to get in. That's what it comes down to for them. But yeah, Washington still being this good and Pittsburgh being that great to me are some of the biggest surprises.
Also, it's kind of crazy. Tampa Bay might be better this year than last year, even if the standings aren't showing it.
Yeah, obviously it's hard to replicate a 62-win season.
Yeah.
But they have been legitimately great if you look at all the underlying numbers. And even just looking at the standings, I mean, they're now back up to second in the Atlantic, plus 38 goal differential. They've been great. And it's scary to think, what may happen now if they get in, because right now they are slated to play the Florida Panthers in the first round.
Oh, please give that to me.
We finally get our battle of Florida.
I mean, this is all I want from this format is if we're going to have this format, I'm actually a fan of it in various different ways. But the main reason I'm a fan of it is give me these local rivalries.
Exactly.
The local rivalries are what make this format fun. The Ducks Kings, the Kings Sharks, the Ducks Sharks, Tampa Florida. We've never gotten that before. That would be so much fun. The fact that if you could potentially, it's not going to happen this year. Sorry, Felix. Toronto Montreal would also be fun.
Could happen.
Sure.
Well, that's the thing that they were actually talking about in the 31 Thoughts podcast lately, is that the format is there. It just hasn't happened. If you look at, like you said, the West Coast teams, they've gotten their fair share. Those teams have just all happened to be good at the same time. I mean, we're going to get that this year in the Pacific. Look at the top 3 teams: Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary. So you're going to get the Western Canadian rivalry
especially
there.
with all the intrigue with Edmonton and Calgary, with all the Matthew Tkachuk stuff that's been going on, and Zach Kassian. Yeah. What's your take on that?
I mean, it is what it is. I don't have a big opinion on that. I think Zach Kassian's kind of an idiot for just coming out swinging like that.
I do not.
But Matthew Tkachuk was clearly taking runs at him as well.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of both in the wrong. I think Kassian just looks so dumb there, swinging at a guy who's not even fighting back.
Yeah, that's the
But
issue
then Tkachuk also looks kind of dumb, just turtling down when he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
So
the thing is, you can't keep throwing. You can't keep throwing if you're Kassian. That's the bad part there, and why he got suspended.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not a good look. It's exciting though. We're talking about it.
It's going to be entertaining to say the least, especially if those teams meet in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, there's potential that, wow, I'm just realizing this. If somehow Winnipeg gets in as the first wild card, which isn't out of the question, they're only 3 points back and they have 2 games in hand. The entire Pacific would be Canadian teams.
Interesting.
You would have Vancouver versus Winnipeg, Edmonton versus Calgary.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
You're guaranteeing a Canadian team in the conference final.
Okay, let's just run through these and then we can wrap up somehow. Who's your MVP?
Ooh, MVP. I gotta go with McDavid.
Wow, you thought about that for a long time.
I gotta go with him. I was thinking whether to go with McKinnon or McDavid. The only thing that you can say about McDavid potentially is that he has Draisaitl with him, and Draisaitl riding shotgun with him. I will also say this, not that I believe this to be a thing or be necessary.
Where's this going?
Media members will look at that he has a -2 plus-minus.
See, I just want your opinion. I don't want these bankrupt
fine.
media
McDavid
opinions.
Then. McDavid.
Okay. Thank you.
What about you?
My MVP. Let me think about this one. There's a lot of different candidates I could choose from. I'm going Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
I don't feel. It doesn't feel as slam dunky as it felt maybe even a month ago. Just because Nathan McKinnon has been so amazingly good, and he doesn't have a Leon Draisaitl on his line this season, and some of his line mates have either been missing games or have just been struggling as opposed to last year. But I just still think that the Oilers are a way worse team outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, and he just has to do so much. The 5-on-5 numbers, it feels insane saying this, but they have dipped a little bit for him. I just still think he's the best player. He's the one that does the most. The Oilers are, the Oilers without McDavid. Oh my.
Oh, it'd be bad.
Oh my. So yeah, he's my MVP.
I want to ask you about this one. Rookie of the Year. Calder Trophy. Because I hadn't checked in on it for a while, and I just looked, and it may get interesting.
This is easy.
Is it?
Yeah, Nick Suzuki. 27 points. He's only 10 behind Cale Makar.
Everyone, if you have any booze near you, this isn't just taking a shot. This is chugging the whole damn bottle for that.
Nick Suzuki's been great. He's been the second line center as like a 21-year-old. Talk about a guy who actually is performing at that age. Wow. Anyway,
you want to know where he ranks in points per games played?
Sure, tell me.
Rookies?
Ninth.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's been very good outside of that.
Sure,
it's not just a points race. Come on now.
-8.
You know better than that. The funny thing is, I think he's been productive, but I think Kotkaniemi was better as a rookie last year. Anyway, sorry that took an interesting turn.
But
my pick for rookie of the year is Quinn Hughes.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Better metrics, close to the same production as Cale Makar.
That was gonna be my thing. Was that in my head? I thought this was runaway for Cale Makar.
No,
because he was way far ahead of everyone. He got hurt a little bit, but so Cale Makar has 37 points in 41 games. Quinn Hughes, 34 points in 48 games.
Yeah, and look at the difference in those rosters as well.
Yeah.
I think what Quinn Hughes has done this season is pretty impressive to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive either way. The fact that both of those players they're both having insane years.
I mean, yeah, they've both been great. Don't get me wrong. Quinn Hughes is only 20. He turned 20 in October to start the season. And when you compare that to Cale Makar, Cale Makar is going to be 22 going into next season. So there is a little bit of a difference in age there. Not trying to take anything away from Makar, but I don't know, just what Quinn Hughes has been able to do this year, it's pretty special. We were talking about those threat charts. The Canucks are plus 11 with him on the ice, and they're in the minus defensively. So he's just been really good. Quinn Hughes is very good. He's my rookie of the year.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention is that may be the reason why you look at drafting Jamie Drysdale, is how the impact that those two have had. By the way, Jamie Drysdale so far this year for Erie has 38 points in 34 games.
Well, look at how good Cam Fowler has been this year and how he's being utilized. And you look at these defensemen coming up and how good they are. I think that's just kind of the new blueprint now is you need a mobile. You need at least one of those guys on your team. You don't need a bunch of rovers, but you need at least one or two.
Yeah, and not trying to sidetrack this to go back onto the draft and the Ducks and the trade.
It's
and
okay.
Like that.
We're a Ducks podcast. It's okay.
I think that honestly makes it more critical to get a second first round pick so you can potentially take your shot for a winger or something, or even a defenseman later in the first. Basically, whatever you take with your top 10 pick, whether it be Jamie Drysdale if he's available, whether if it is one of those wingers that I had mentioned, or Cole Perfetti, who's a center, whoever you end up picking, because most likely you're not going to get either the top two guys, and most likely Jamie Drysdale is going to go early. Mm-hmm. So I think the likelihood of getting any of those three is not high.
Right.
But if you can somehow get one of those or any of those guys, you want a second first round pick so that you can then be able to make up for what you missed in the early part of that first round. So you can potentially take a defenseman if there's someone on the board that's a bit risky, or another winger or something along those lines to help fill out your system.
Well, I mean, I've been beating this drum all year, it feels like, but the Ducks should be following this model that you just described, just like they did last year. Have 2 first round picks each year, right?
It's
move off of one of your contracts, get a first out of it, and then you have so much more flexibility.
Well, it's funny to me, the main complaint that I've seen from people with me, basically
with you, just let's stop there with you.
Yeah, just with me. No, with the fact that I'm riding shotgun in the train of Trey Jacob Silverberg is the fact of he's the best player on the Ducks, and that what you get in the first round isn't a guarantee to play out, and they may not even be on the team for 2 to 3 years and all this different type of stuff. But the thing is, it allows you to kind of set your team up moving forward. It provides a blueprint for success moving forward, whereas having some of these guys doesn't necessarily set you up for success in the future. And I think that's the very critical thing with getting multiple first-round picks, with getting picks for whoever you can, is that you can end up basically kind of setting the blueprint. If you have a second first-round pick, you can either be risky with that top 10 pick, or you
just make another pick. Just take another guy. And that's the thing is, if you look at the trades that the Ducks have made in recent years, there's been some movement of picks, and there's been later picks as a result of being a playoff team, a good team. And so they kind of need to make up for lost time. And I think getting additional bites at the apple is always the way to go.
Well, and even if you got another Max Jones late in the first round, and he comes into the Ducks team in 2 to 3 years, is that a bad thing?
No.
Yeah.
It's not. Okay, let's move on with our awards here. Norris Trophy, best defenseman, or defenseman with best plus minus and plays for a noteworthy team that's in the playoffs and has the most. Oh, sorry, did I just describe John Carlson? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Who's your pick for the Norris Trophy?
It's gonna be John Carlson.
No, I don't care about what it's gonna be. I want to hear your opinion.
Oh.
I do not care about
my opinion. It should be Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there, which is disappointing. Doesn't make for the best podcasting, but
all right,
I think
it's Roman Josi then.
You don't believe that, though. I know.
No, I don't. I don't.
I know you don't believe that. Yeah, I would go with Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah,
I would go Dougie.
Dougie Hamilton's been so good. The rate at which he generates shots for the Hurricanes, the way that the Hurricanes barely ever have to defend, it's kind of nuts with him on the ice. He's so good, and it is absolutely insane that this is his third team.
Yeah, well, it says a lot about the teams that traded him.
Well, it says a lot about hockey culture as a whole.
It says a lot about museums. Okay, let's. Well, we both have Dougie Hamilton. That's a little disappointing. Vezina, give me your Vezina trophy. Best goalie.
Give me a second.
Okay, well, I'll give you my pick. It's kind of a lame one because I'm basically just using the stats, but I don't care. Connor Hellebuck. I mean, he leads all starting goalies in save percentage above expected, and that blue line he's playing behind in Winnipeg, dumpster. This is just not a good blue line. They moved out some talent. Jacob Trouba left last season, and Dustin Byfuglien has been MIA, and they just haven't been able to replace that. And the fact that they're even flirting with the playoffs, I think, is a testament to how good he has been. And so I would go with Connor Hellebuck. I've been on that train most of the season, and I don't really see any reason to turn back from that now.
I would agree, but
change my mind. My mind. I know you hate Connor Hellebuck.
I don't hate Connor Hellebuck. I just don't know if he's as good as everyone thought he'd be, but he's had a really, really insanely good year. So let's go with, you know what? For argument's sake, I'm going to go with Ben Bishop, who he's been very good. Probably should have won the Vezina last year, to be honest. And I think maybe that sticks with some people. He should have won it over Vasilevsky, to be honest. You also have Darcy Kemper. Both of them have had better GSAXs on the year per Evolving Wild. Ben Bishop's...
Here is my issue with giving it to Bishop, though. And it's through no fault of his own.
It's the fact that Hellebuck's defense is worse?
Well, that's part of it. But also, I mean, Connor Hellebuck has played almost 600 more minutes. So Connor Hellebuck is third in minutes played for goalies this year, and Ben Bishop is 18th. So workload.
So where are they going to end up? How much do you factor in workload for the final amount? Because Hellebuck's played 41 games, and I believe that the Jets have played 49 games in total. So I don't know if it's likely that he's going to be able to keep up that pace.
Well, maybe not, but it's just we're just awarding what has happened. We're not projecting this out. And
Fair.
So I would give it to Hellebuck just because he's had the most workload from a shot perspective, from the amount of time he's played and how he's outperformed that. So I would give it to Hellebuck, but like I'm not like totally just dismissing your Bishop pick. Bishop has a .927 raw save percentage compared to Hellebuck's 919, but the above expected, Hellebuck's a plus 0.5, whereas Bishop's a plus 0.2. So when you factor in their environment, Hellebuck has been better. Not by a whole lot, but I think I put the workload in.
So Hellebuck's played 68, or is on pace to play 68 or 69 games this season, for the Jets, whereas Ben Bishop's on pace to play 55 games for the Stars. So does it become a negative for Ben Bishop that he has a good backup goalie? Because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're penalizing him for having Anton Hudobin on the team to provide him some relief, whereas Connor Hellebuck, as like I said, he's played in 41 of 49 games. I think that's more of an indictment of the fact that Winnipeg does not trust their backup goaltender.
I don't care about any of that, though. This is about what they've done.
No, I know, but that you're essentially penalizing Ben Bishop.
No, I'm not. I'm awarding Connor Hellebuck.
But GSA, I'm going to go with Ben Bishop on this one. You know what?
So
it's gone from just being for argument's sake to I'm team Ben Bishop. Darcy Kemper's also been good, by the way. Not as
also with Ben Bishop's injury history, there's probably a reason that they're deploying him this way.
Yeah, which is smart. Also, playing a goalie,
I just think
potentially playing a goalie 60 plus games is not smart.
Playing considerably more behind a considerably worse team.
So, all right, one thing that I do want to add on that
outperforming. I mean, there's really no objective argument for
on
Bishop
the considerably worse team aspect. That would show its face in GSAX.
Do you not think the Jets are worse than Dallas?
No, but what I'm saying is the whole point of having goals saved above expected is for you to be able to isolate expected shot
and Hellebuck
is
better than Bishop in that respect.
No, he is not. Which website are you looking at?
I'm looking at Money Puck.
I'm looking at Evolving Wild.
Oh, okay. So you're using fake stats compared to mine to make your argument. Well, that's great. That's fine.
Now, okay. I'll look at Evolving Wild to see where it's at, or not Evolving Wild, Money Puck. But Evolving Wild has Ben Bishop at 7.83 GSAX, Hellebuck at 6.29.
Well, all right. Let's move on from this one. You pick Bishop. I pick Hellebuck. Hey, I don't think either of those are bad picks. I would go with Hellebuck, but there's an argument for Bishop for sure, as weak of an argument as it might be. Okay.
Wow.
Coach of the year. I think you have Torts.
If they make the playoffs, I don't know how you get to anyone but Torts.
None of this wishy-washy. Don't give me that.
This isn't. Oh, no. So
give me the real.
Part of it has to be what.
No, we're awarding the half season that has happened.
Gerard Gallant.
What? Is this just a protest pick?
Yes.
It's a protest pick?
Gerard Gallant should be coach of the year.
Well, my pick is Mike Sullivan, but outside of Mike Sullivan,
all right, so
I don't know. Yeah.
Let's go with
I know who you're going to pick.
Who am I going to pick?
I feel like you want to pick Rick Tocchet.
No, I don't actually.
Really? Wow.
No. I think
you're
he's
basically
a
Coyotes fan.
So
don't you own a Kachina jersey?
No, I do want to get a Kachina jersey. Should I get Here's a question for everyone out there. Please hit me up on Twitter. Should I get a Kachina jersey? And if I do, should I get Taylor Hall or Phil Kessel? These are some real questions out there that I need answers to.
I would wait to get a Taylor Hall.
No, but I mean, I don't care. I'm not a Coyotes fan. I don't care if I have a jersey of a guy that was there for 6 months.
Okay, well, fair play to you then.
Yeah, it becomes a collector's item.
Do you have any opinion on the Selke Trophy?
No, not really.
Just give it to Anthony Cirelli. Just give it to Anthony Cirelli.
Sure. It's probably gonna go to Barkov. No, give it to Mark Stone.
I think Ryan O'Reilly will get it.
Most likely. Yeah. Oh wait, real quick, want to go back. Yeah, Torts should probably win with that team. With everyone leaving,
if Columbus gets in.
Yes.
Well,
it's remarkable what he's done with that team. The fact that they lost Panarin, they lost Bobrovsky, they lost Zingle, they lost Duchesne.
Lost, quote unquote, Matt Duchesne.
Okay, they had Matt Duchesne last year, and they don't have him now.
Yeah, no, I mean they're a worse team.
They are without a doubt a worse team, and the fact that he's done it with, they haven't brought in a replacement goaltender for
Yeah. Who wants Sergei Bobrovsky this season?
When you have Elvis Merzlikins.
Yeah, when Elvis is in the building.
Yeah. And the fact that he's done it with that, the fact that the replacement for Artemi Panarin was Gustav Nyquist.
Hey, Gustav Nyquist is a good player.
Is he Artemi Panarin? Don't even try. Don't even try. I saw that look.
Artemi Panarin has been very good for the Rangers this season, by the way. Something to mention. Yeah, are we missing any awards here? I think we kind of hit them all. Who do you have winning the scoring race? Now we're kind of projecting out.
Oh, it's gonna be McDavid. Who do you have as GM of the year?
GM? Well, hold on. I mean, Draisaitl is 1 point behind McDavid.
Yeah, it's gonna be McDavid.
Okay. Okay. Hey, more power to you. GM of the year. Ooh, that is one that I have not given any thought. GM of the year. Huh. Do you have an opinion on this?
You know what? I'm going to go with Kyle Dubas.
Oh, get out of here. Get out. They're not even in the playoffs. What the hell? What kind of garbage pick is that? Sorry.
Going to go for Kyle Dubas.
Drew the ire a little bit there.
Your Leafs hate is showing. Your Canadians fan
Mark Bergevin, GM of the year.
No, but hear me out on this. He was dealing with kind of an impossible situation with Mitch Marner in the summer. He was left with the
impossible. I mean, yeah, when you're allowed to cheat the CBA, you know,
he was able to essentially pay a first-round pick to get someone off the books.
Yeah.
He was able to bring in Tyson Barrie for Nazem Kadri. There's potential if he's able to make another couple moves. The fact that the William Nylander deal does not even look like a bad deal anymore. That's panned out.
The biggest move he's made has been firing Mike Babcock.
Well, yeah, that's panned out also. There's a whole lot there. That's also me just kind of sticking up for a GM that I'm a big fan of and a big fan of the way he approaches the game. What do you think about John Chayka?
None of these guys are my pick. Okay. I mean, John Chayka has done a good job. Don't get me wrong.
Give me your pick then.
Boring pick, but Julien Brisebois. I think that you look at where Tampa Bay is now and how I think a lot of teams would have reacted to getting swept by Columbus in the first round. His reaction was, we're a good team still. We lost the series, but we're a good team. And you could argue that they're even better now. Actually, they are a better team now. They brought in Patrick Maroon as a fourth liner. They got Kevin Shattenkirk on a great contract. They've improved their team, and they didn't kind of fall to the trap of blowing everything up because of a small sample. They trusted what they were. They got better around the edges. They didn't fire a really good coach in John Cooper, even if it would have even been defensible to do that. They didn't do it. They stuck with him. And they even stuck out that tough beginning where, again, a lot of teams would have maybe gotten jittery and done some type of panic move. So look, there's a reason good teams stay good and bad teams stay bad. And I think that the Tampa Bay Lightning, under Julien Brisebois' leadership, have shown why they've been one of the best franchise in the league for a few years now.
Shocking. Not overreacting to playoff woes is a good
getting
thing.
Antoine Vermette and Jared Bowl and getting rid of all your good players as a result of playoff disappointment.
Real quick, do you want to? We're going a bit long here, but I think we had a real fun conversation in the Anaheim Calling Slack chat today about Bob Murray. And
was it fun, or was it just painful like they usually are?
It was entertaining, but me and Sapphire Justin Ritzel, he was talking about the Trail of Tears, a sad moment for the Ducks. I can't even remember what he had mentioned, but the real kind of insane lineage for the Ducks is the replacement Chris Prongers. It is insane. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to take you down this history road for the Ducks. And I'm curious to hear you hear your reactions as we go along here. But so the Ducks traded away Chris Pronger.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was that summer, may have been a summer after, they went out and signed Andy Sutton. And he even wore the same number that Chris Pronger did and was horrible. Basically, they signed him to be a poor man's Chris Pronger. They eventually traded him for Curtis Foster, who did not pan out for the Ducks, did not play in a role that the Ducks would have wanted at all. But that didn't work out. They then brought Lucas Sabizza up to fill that role. And granted, they had traded for him in the Pronger deal, and Sabizza was supposed to play that role. They then added, after that, Brian Allen to fill that role. Brian Allen never panned out in the way they thought they would after a season and a half, so they go out and they sign Clayton Stoner. And then Clayton Stoner goes, and as Brian Allen is being poor and isn't really playing and anything like that, they end up moving him. What happens after they move him to Montreal? Everyone gets hurt, and they make a deal for Eric Brewer.
Nice.
Eric Brewer then comes to the Ducks.
Nice.
And once everyone's healthy, he becomes a nothing player on the team. Eric Brewer is then moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs along with a pick for Corbinian Holzer. And that is actually how Corbinian Holzer came to the Ducks team. But you had Clayton Stoner, who eventually wore out his welcome and was moved along with Shea Theodore to the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah.
And eventually for a bit there were the Ducks not trying to fill that role. And then they go get Eric Branson, which is a whole nother thing. But essentially, this all started with moving Chris Pronger. And it's ended with the Ducks losing Shea Theodore. And the only thing they have left from it all is Corbinian Holzer.
Here's my question. In the last 5 years, let's say, well, and I'm going 5 because that doesn't just totally have me cherry picking. What is the argument for Bob Murray being a good GM?
Drafting. But here's one thing I want to make clear. A lot of people will cite his drafting as being good. I don't know if his drafting's that good. I mean,
he's drafted guys who are nominally playing in the NHL, but
people hype it up, but that's kind of just average.
Yeah, like that in and of itself is not as impressive as, hey, like, would you rather have one impact player or what the Ducks have now with their prospects?
And they have had some good hits late in the draft, like a Josh Manson, like a
yes,
Kasha,
but
those are bound to happen.
My point is, when you're drafting, obviously you want to draft as many guys that end up making a team. But to me, what you should be drafting for is just the highest upside possible. And so I would rather have 1 or 2 guys that are actual impact players than what they have right now, which is 5 guys who might get there, who are or are not showing signs of actually being able to get there. Anyway, all this to say, we're getting off track. We've talked enough about prospects this podcast. You bring up this whole Chris Pronger thing, and I don't know really what the argument is for Bob Murray having done this great job over the last few years.
Yeah,
the team has only gotten worse.
At the end of the day, he in certain ways kind of wasted Getzlaf and Perry's prime. They only made 2 conference finals over the course of their prime, and I think that is winning a cup is tough. No, there's no doubt about that.
I actually don't see that part of it. I actually don't put on him because there were a lot of years that were just toss-up losses, Game 7 losses.
Fair.
And I don't think that it was the roster necessarily. I mean, I haven't done the super specific breakdown of that, but my point, I just think the last few years have been a noticeable
decline,
step down. Yeah, decline from where he was in those years where at least the team was competing. Because your point about wasting Getzlaf and Perry isn't necessarily lost in the sense that their later years were wasted. The last years, like the last year or so where Perry was healthy, where even Kessler was still healthy, they kind of just threw those away because, like I just talked about with Brisebois, instead of staying patient after that disappointing loss against Nashville in 2016, they kind of just blew it up. They kind of just stripped it down. And to be fair, the year after they did make the conference final, but that team, they didn't feel as close just on true talent. And then that really showed itself the years after. So
Ginger Wolf, this kind of goes along with our topic. What data do we have that makes us all so confident Bob Murray is trash? So I don't know if there's necessarily hard data.
Look at the standings.
Well, yeah, I think that also the 5-on-5 play, the biggest honestly issue I have with Bob Murray that I think honestly over the course of his tenure as the Ducks general manager that is the most fireable offense is hiring Randy Carlyle a second time.
Well, and that's really, I think, where this thing, like, to me, the whole Bob Murray arc is that he did a really good job in the beginning of the 2010s.
Yes.
Built a team that got within a game of the Stanley Cup final against a
And
really good Chicago team. And that team had a legitimate shot. That was a
well,
legitimately good team.
and
And then built an even better team the year after.
one thing I do want to add is that there is this connotation with Bob Murray that he never went out and made the deal for the team.
He did.
But he made a lot of trades for those teams, and I think that that narrative I think needs to be shifted slightly. Going out and getting Ryan Kessler in the offseason was a big move. He was constantly making deals. Now, none of them were huge deals, but those are kind of the hard ones to make at the deadline. But you look at 2016 when he brought in David Perron a little bit before. He brought in Jamie McGinn. He brought in Brandon Peary. He made a lot of moves. And, I mean, even the year before, 2015, the Lovejoy for Dupre thing, that was revolutionary for that Ducks team. And getting James Wisniewski also. Like, there were a lot of really good things.
That's what I'm saying, is that he did a lot of good things, and then the loss in 2016 to Nashville led to this horrible overreaction where, okay, firing Bruce Boudreau is one thing, but then bringing in Randy Carlyle, who you fired for a reason, who
you fired to hire Bruce Boudreau.
And also nothing really inspiring about his Toronto stint. That was a mistake. And then just the way he handled the roster after that, the expansion draft, that is the decline to me. And look, we've seen with other GMs where if you give them time, they can sort it out. And the thing with Bob Murray is that he doesn't really have this super long leash. He's on a shorter term contract. So we'll just have to see. We will just have to see.
Yep. And let's wrap up with this question because I think it's going to be a very short answer from both you and me. The Frostback says, interesting question. Going back to the expansion draft, do we regret trading Shea Theodore?
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
that is going to go down as one of those huge mistakes because Shea Theodore changes everything about this blue line.
Instead of losing Theodore for them to take Stoner, what you do is you let them take one of Manson or Sammy Vatanen.
Well, that's the thing that I think we kind of forget, and that is instructive looking into the next expansion draft, is that teams really overreacted to the possibility that they may lose a good player. We obviously are never going to know what was specifically being said, but at the end of the day, you can only lose one guy.
Yep.
So, look, there's going to be a risk, but you have to decide who you are more willing to protect. And you could argue at the time picking Josh Manson was the right call, but Shea Theodore, losing him for all of that's one that's not going to sit well for a long time. And also, I think Brandon Montour's presence on the roster, and even Jacob Larsson's, like all of these different guys who were, and even Marcus Pettersson, they had a glut of young defensemen at the time. And there was this thought that, well, you can stomach losing a Shea Theodore because look how good Brandon Montour has been in the AHL. Look how promising, quote unquote, Jacob Larsson looks. Same deal with Marcus Pettersson. And as it turns out, Shea Theodore is head and shoulders the best player of that group.
Yeah.
He was the better player at the time, and he continues to be the better player.
Yeah.
So
Lewis X209, by the way, asked, is Jimmy G going to throw it more than 10 times in the Super Bowl? So yes. This is where I say congratulations to you and your Niners. Good luck in the Super Bowl, but I'm rooting for the Chiefs.
Thank you, Chargers fan. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's me. Big Chargers fan right here. Big time.
Yeah, this is gonna be not to now completely make this about football, but this is the Super Bowl outside of just my own team being in it. Just as a sheer football fan, this is gonna be the best Super Bowl in a long time, I think.
Yeah, if you want 5 minutes, go for it. Seeing as I've definitely talked about Tottenham in the Champions League final more than
and people
times.
Actually care about football.
Hey, they're both footballs.
Well, American football versus soccer.
Football. They're both football. They're both football.
Yeah. Well, look, it's going to be a great game. I'm really excited for it. The 49ers have shown they can win any which way. You've seen Jimmy G win shootouts like the game against the Saints. Down the stretch, you saw them completely dismiss the Green Bay Packers with the run game. They did the same thing the week before to Minnesota. The Chiefs are a high-flying offense. I'm just excited to see it. It's going to be a great game. I'm very excited. That's all I have to say.
All right. I'm excited to see what Patrick Mahomes can do in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing is, I'm not like obviously I want my team to win, but I'm not going to be sad if the Chiefs
If
win this one.
Mahomes goes off.
Yeah, and also Andy Reid, and it's a good story.
You know what I was thinking about today? I was listening to it was either the Lead or ESPN Daily on my drive home.
Of course
from
you
work.
were. Of course you were.
Why?
You're never not listening to a podcast.
Unless I'm listening to the Ducks game on the drive home. That's
You
the
always
only
have
time.
something going.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, always.
Anyway.
Brain's always racing.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it. Is Patrick Mahomes where is
this going?
Is he on the level of kind of where Michael Vick was in his peak when he was at the Atlanta Falcons? And but I was just trying to think about the fact that that's happening in the Super Bowl, that we're getting that level of kind of electric type player in the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, and he's probably has been for the last 2 years now. He was injured early in the season, and Lamar Jackson was on such a tear that people kind of forgot. But then you saw Lamar Jackson and how he lost against Tennessee. So it's exciting. It is really exciting. Patrick Mahomes is such a fun player to watch. The 49ers, they're my favorite team. The way they play isn't necessarily the most entertaining. That just happens when you run the ball almost every single play. But the way in which they just outclass teams on both sides of the ball, doing it in these creative ways, I mean, you just got to appreciate it and tip your cap to it.
Yep. All right. So I think that's enough.
Any wrestling takes?
Wrestling
You're going to SmackDown.
No, NXT Live, 2 weeks from Sunday, or a week from Sunday. I'm very excited.
You excited?
Wait, no, 2 weeks from Sunday. Very excited. February 9th, Riverside, something. Wife got me tickets for my birthday, and some friends are going. It's going to be a blast. I'm so excited. NXT is my second favorite wrestling show behind AEW Dynamite. So I'm very excited to see potentially maybe the Undisputed Era show up. Maybe some Keith Lee, bask in his glory. Who knows what else there can be as that's coming on. And also, in wrestling news, Royal Rumble this Sunday. Also, it hit me this past weekend. The WWE definitely planned the Royal Rumble to be the weekend between the conference final and the Super Bowl. And that's very smart planning by them to be able to get views. But Royal Rumble is my favorite gimmick match of all time. So, yeah, Chad, I know it's 2 weeks from Sunday. Not a week from Sunday, the show.
I'm just loving this wrestling talk.
The Royal Rumble is my favorite gimmick match. So, Felix, do you know what the Royal Rumble is?
No.
Do you want to know?
Of course not. I literally have no idea what you're talking about.
The Royal Rumble is... Are you actually listening, or are you now just looking at your phone?
Just go on.
All right. So, the Royal Rumble is a match where two men enter the ring to start. It's an over-the-top battle royal where if a man is thrown over the top ropes and both feet hit the floor, he is eliminated. Every either 90 seconds or 2 minutes, not sure how they're doing it this year, a new person comes out and enters the fray. And that continues until all 30 competitors have come into the ring and 29 of them been thrown over the top. You also want to know one of the best parts? It's happening in Houston at the Astros ballpark.
Oh.
And this is wrestling where people can get on mics and try to get the crowd angry.
Team vacate?
There is going to be someone, and including the fact that the guy who's entering first overall has a manager that comes with him who's one of the best talkers in the history of wrestling, in Paul Heyman. He's going to do something. Someone's going to get out a trash can also and do something with it. There's a Falls Count Anywhere match where they're going to be all over the same, and someone's probably going to hit a trash can. They're going to end up in a dugout maybe. Who knows? It's going to be great. I'm very excited. The Royal Rumble is one of my favorite events, so I'm very excited. Chad saying put a buzzer in their shirts.
I love that. That's a good comment. That's a very good comment. Also a good comment in our Twitch chat here. No Patriots equals enjoyable game from Good Guy in Sports.
Yep.
Agreed. That's half the excitement. It's just finally no Patriots. God. Also, let's see. We had another good comment. Shoot. I lost it. There's so many. Yeah. Also, question from Gingerwolf. Is the XFL as exciting as wrestling?
So here's my hope with the XFL.
I want to see the XFL.
No, here's my hope with the XFL. That it gets Vince McMahon out of the WWE and lets Triple H take over because Vince McMahon is ruining Raw and SmackDown.
always about. Is Johnny Manziel gonna be in the XFL?
I don't know. Vince McMahon is the one paying for it, so I hope that takes all of his attention.
What's more of a charade, Vince McMahon or Johnny Manziel being in there? Yeah, I type in Johnny Manziel on Google, and one of the first links that comes up is Johnny Manziel is not good enough to play in the XFL from Fox Sports. So,
wow.
Yeah, probably not a good sign if you're not good enough to play in the XFL. I mean, it's football, I guess. I probably won't be watching it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we have way too much to watch.
Yeah, I mean, this hockey season is enough on its own, and there was MMA on Saturday.
Oh yeah, what'd you think of the fight? Well, while we're doing this, so we're an hour and a half.
I mean, yeah,
might as well.
We're basically doing SportsCenter rundown.
Hey, like I said, this is what happens on the Patreon episodes. You're all getting a sample of what they become. It's either this or it becomes us talking Star Wars, us talking something.
I think
this is how it ends up.
I'm sure the 99% of our listeners are diehard Ducks fans, but I'm sure for every sport there's a cross section of listeners that watch that particular sport. Like you and your wrestling cohort, you know.
Wait, who's my wrestling cohort?
We have people who listen that are wrestling fans.
Yes, because
that's what I'm saying.
Because it's a performance art.
I don't know what that means in the context.
I just wanted to say that to confuse you. It's a performance art.
No, performance art is like ballet.
Yeah.
Art.
Yeah.
Not bashing someone over the head.
Yeah.
Well, fake bashing someone over the head.
It's storytelling. It's a performance art.
What is the story being told?
The story being told is a good guy versus a bad guy. It's a story old as time. It's someone trying to get over on someone.
I just opened Pandora's box. I gotta shut it back. Yeah. The fight. UFC 246. Wow. Actually, the card sucked. That's my first takeaway. There was not one super exciting fight in there, which is what happens when you have to give all the money to Conor McGregor at the top of the card. It's kind of hard to squeeze everyone else in. It's unfortunate because Dana White used to talk about in the early days of UFC how they weren't the kind of promotion that had, really shallow cards, that they were always going to be stacked cards. So that aspect was disappointing. But
what do you think of the fight?
The fight itself, the only thing everyone cares about. Yeah, I mean, R.I.P. Cowboy Cerrone. Like, that guy should retire. He's been stopped 3 times in a row now. Like, CTE? Question mark.
Well, so you're someone who actually pays attention to fighting or to MMA decently. Like, you know what's going on. Who do you think that... well, first off, do you think that this happened because Cowboy Cerrone is horrible or McGregor is actually somewhat back?
Oh, man. See, this is like... So many people online were saying that Cerrone took a dive in this one.
Yeah, that's not true. I saw that also. There's no way that's true.
That is a massive price to pay for whatever you would be given under the table. Did you see his face from 40 seconds?
Although, I don't know if I've ever seen someone do a shoulder, hit.
He broke his nose. He broke his nose on the first strike.
Whatever you want to call it, striking someone with your shoulder is insane.
Yeah. Well, and to break the guy's nose.
Yeah.
Out of that is what's more impressive. Yeah, it's funny because no one's talking about the fight. Everyone's just talking about who's Conor going to fight next.
I was about to ask you that.
I love how that's the only concern, not just what we just witnessed. Well, yeah, so the fight itself, I think that it's a combination of Cowboy Cerrone being a noted slow starter, Conor McGregor being a noted fast starter. One guy's fresh. One guy's had some brutal fights over the last year. This was a setup in terms of there's a reason they picked Cowboy Cerrone against Conor McGregor because it's a fight you can sell because Cowboy's a veteran and you could talk yourself into him winning that fight. But at the end of the day, a healthy Conor who's at the top of his form is going to annihilate him. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So
who do you think they should have Conor fight next?
By the way, I just want to jump into my my body language conspiracy theories. If you watch the build up to that fight, Conor was very courteous to Cowboy Cerrone, and Cowboy was smiling, complimenting him in the press conference. And then when they got to the stare down, Cowboy was still smiling, and Conor just switched to stone-faced. And I think that's the moment where it flipped, and Cowboy didn't realize, oh, wait, I've been fooled. I'm gonna get my I believe that. Okay, who do I think he fights next? It's hard to say because I don't think it's going to be Khabib.
I don't think it will be Khabib.
Because well,
Who's
Dana
who's wait who's
Dana White was pushing for Khabib, but it's like if him and Tony Ferguson are actually fighting in April, how could it be possible that Conor would have to wait until the end of the year, and he wants to fight at least 3 times this year.
who was the one that fought Nate Diaz for that Banff title?
So that's the one that everyone's saying, which is probably the likeliest one is Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah, that's the guy I was thinking of.
I don't know if I want to see Conor fight Jorge Masvidal just because he's a legit welterweight. Like he's a guy who I think has to cut down to 170, whereas Conor kind of like walks around at 170. It would be an entertaining fight, but that's probably who's next. I think he should fight Justin Gaethje, but I think they're just going to send him straight to the money fight, which we'll see how that goes.
There's your fight corner with Felix after I gave you wrestle corner.
Yeah, exactly. We're just covering all of our bases. See, Lewis thinks it's Conor Khabib.
From performance art to actual fighting.
Lewis, I don't think it's going to be Khabib. Just I don't want to see Khabib too because I don't know what would go differently this time.
Yeah,
I think he just gets choked out again. Ginger Wolf, do we see Delorier in UFC? Hey, I mean, I think he's buddies with George St. Pierre. I don't actually know that, but I've heard him say he trains fighters in Montreal. So,
wow, just assuming, just assuming.
There's a short list of guys that could be. So yeah, I would love to see it. I mean, it'll never happen, but I would love to see it. He's got the tats for it.
Yeah. All right. This has been a fun one, but I think it's finally time to wrap up. So if you want to support this show, if you've been listening to us interact with the Twitch chat, you can join in on that Twitch stream by going to twitch.tv/acpod, where you can join us, interact with us live. You can support the show. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime sub each and every month, where you get special emotes in the chat, special badges next to your name, and it's a real good time. You can also support us if you want to find the show on YouTube and search for AC Pod. Subscribe to the channel, like the video. If you want to comment, I'll go through those and I'll reply to them. If it's something that you want me to reply to, if it's a question or anything like that. You can also support us by going to patreon.com/acpod, which you can support the show, $1 tier. With that $1 tier, you get access to our Discord chat, which we will be in throughout the days at various points in time, and specifically during games when we can be. And at the $5 tier is the real fun one, which is where you get 2 bonus episodes a month, which are basically exactly like this. So if you did enjoy this exact type of thing where it's very free-flowing, it doesn't exactly always have a set schedule. It's not like our main show where we're kind of going through a game, breaking down things. It's kind of more us having a conversation, 2 friends talking about hockey, figuring out where we're going, talking about different types of stuff, getting on tangents at the end also pretty frequently.
Gnarly tangents.
Check that out because there are a whole host of these episodes for you. I believe, what are we, in the 30s now?
Yeah, we're on, well, for a second I thought this was one. We've had 33 so far.
Yeah, so there are some of them are a little bit more kind of topic of the day. Some of them are kind of more timeless where you could even probably go back and listen to them now and enjoy it. So check that out, the $5 tier. And the final way that's absolutely free to you, if you have Apple Podcasts, if you could leave us a rating or review there, it's free to you, helps us out a lot by getting us up the charts a bit. So we do actually have 2 new reviews. One of them is from Mikey DDD, said best Ducks podcast out there, 5 stars. Felix and Jake do an amazing job at combining entertainment with advanced NHL metrics analysis. They've made this season following the Ducks so much more fun. Highly recommend. And then a 5-star that was super. Pozdrav from Croatia. I listen your show very much. Go Ducks. So I apologize if I butchered your name. I tried.
Probably did.
Most likely.
We read a lot of crazy names covering the NHL.
We do. But so we really appreciate that, especially in a season like this. We hope that we can provide you some joy. Yeah, throughout some kind of.
I was telling Jake this the other day, but we've had some bad luck where we start doing a podcast in the midst of the Ducks' like most irrelevant years.
We had one decent season, kind of ish. They had 100+ points that year.
Yeah, but then they got swept in the first round.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
we never even got a playoff win to talk about.
Yeah,
I can remember that playoff series being like, please, I just want to talk about one playoff win, please.
Yeah, no, that was a bit brutal. Okay, well, a couple different ways that you can support the show as well. Just go over to Anaheim Calling. That's at Anaheim Calling on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter at Reindeer Games 91. I'm on Twitter at Felix_Sicard. Jake has an article coming out sometime this week.
Yep, wrapping up the finishing touches on it probably tonight. So potentially tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yep, and then I have an article coming out later this week taking a look at the Ducks season as a whole. So keep it locked in to the social media channels. I think you mentioned this already, but we're also on Spotify.
Yes.
And
I have
YouTube.
not mentioned it yet. And
we're also on YouTube.
Yes.
YouTube is important.
I did mention that one.
Okay. Just covering all the bases here, just checking all the boxes. That'll do it for tonight's show, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you at the next episode. Thanks a lot.
Bye.